Objective A. Solve an equation involving rational expressions. Number 1. X over 5 minus x over 6 equals 1. When you solve equations like this, where you have fractions, it doesn't matter if it's a rational equation or it's just a linear equation. I always recommend my students to get rid of the denominators as soon as possible. How do you get rid of the denominators? Well, LCD. So let's find out LCD. Just like in the last section, to find out LCD, first thing to do is identify all the denominators. We have 5 and we have 6. So you just need to figure out what is the least common multiple that is divisible by all these denominators, which is 5 and 6. Well, 30, right? That is the minimum number that is divisible by both 5 and 6. Once you find out this LCD, you simply multiply the entire equation by this LCD. Make sure you distribute this 30 into every single term in your equation. We have 3 terms right here, so you're going to distribute this 30 3 times. Now let's distribute. X over 5 times 30 minus x over 6 times 30 equals 1 times 30. And you could cross out the 5 and 30 and write down a 6 next to 30 because 30 divided by 5 is 6. Same thing, cross out 6 and 30, write a 5 next to 30 because 30 divided by 6 is 5. Let's check out what's left. First term is 6x times 6, that is 6x, minus x times 5, that is 5x, equals 1 times 30, that is 30. And notice that after I multiply everything by LCD, there are no denominators anymore. It becomes a very nice looking equation. Combine like terms on the left hand side. 6x minus 5x, that is 1x, or just x, equals 30. And then we're done with number 1. The answer is 30. And of course, the title says solve and check. So if you plug x equals 30 back into the original equation, you should be able to make the equation true. Number 3. 4 over x plus 5 equals 6 over x. The difference between solving a general, like a linear equation, quadratic equation, versus solving a rational equation like number 3 is the restrictions. So if you remember from earlier sections, for any rational expressions, there are some kind of restrictions on the variable, which is the denominator cannot be 0. And that's what you need to do before you solve any rational equations. Number 3, we have variable in the denominator, so this is a rational equation, and you need to check what are the restrictions. These are pretty easy to see that the denominator cannot be 0. That means x cannot be negative 5. Otherwise, the first denominator, x plus 5, will be 0. Also, x cannot be 0, because if x is 0, then the rational expression on the right-hand side of the equation will also be undefined. Write down that first, because that's your restriction. And then, what you're going to do is you're going to solve this rational equation. This rational equation, you have a rational equation equals another rational equation. The most effective way of solving this will simply be multiplying both sides by LCD, but you could also just do cross multiplication. So I'm going to do cross multiplication. Just remember, this only works if you have rational expression equals rational expression. Only 2 terms in your equation. After you do cross multiplication, we will have 4x equals, so here I'm going to distribute 6x plus 30. And then I'm going to, let's just move that 6x to the left hand side. It doesn't matter where you move them. We will have negative 2x equals 30. Divide both sides by coefficient of x, which is negative 2. We obtain x is negative 15. And before you say that the answer is negative 15, make sure you check with the restrictions. Our restriction says x cannot be negative 5 or 0. and we didn't get either one of those. We get negative 15, so this one is correct. That is our final answer. Another way to do is you plug it back into the original equation and then check if left equals right. But I think checking the restriction is a little bit easier. And that is number 3. Number 5. A minus 2 over a plus 1 equals 4 over 7. So this is another proportion looking rational equation where you have one rational equation on either side of the equation. So the best way to do it is cross multiplication. Let's do cross multiplication. 7a minus 14 equals 4a plus 4. And then move the variables around. So I'm going to subtract 4a from both sides. That will give you 3a minus 14 equals 4. And then plus 14 on both sides. And we obtain 3a equals 18. Divide both sides by 3. We obtain a is 6. Before you conclude that your answer is 6, make sure you compare this with the restriction of the equation. There's only one variable denominator, which is right here. This one cannot be 0, so that basically means a cannot be negative 1, which is not what we found. So you could safely say that your answer a is equal to 6, and that is correct. Number 7. Number 7 is not even a rational equation because we don't have variables in the denominator, but we do have 3, 6, 4 as denominators, which is a little bit annoying. First thing, LCD. Since it's just numbers, you just need to find out what is the least common multiple of 3, 6, and 4. Using the trick that I said last time, you're going to start with the largest number, which is 6. And then you're going to check, is 6 divisible by 3? Yes. Is 6 divisible by 4? No. So I'm going to move on to the next multiple of 6, which is 12. Is 12 divisible by 3? Yes. Is 12 divisible by 4? Yes. So our LCD must be 12. Multiply the entire equation by 12. And notice that we have 3 terms in our equation, so you're going to distribute that 12 3 times. I'm going to multiply right away. So the first term, if you cancel out 3 and 12, you have a 4 on the top. Equals, cancel out 6 and 12, you have a 2 on the top. So 5 times 2. And then finally, cancel out 4 and 12, you have a 3 on the top. So 3 times 3x. And then you simplify this equation. ax minus 4 equals 10 minus 9x. Move that negative 9x to the left hand side. I will get 17x. Move the negative 4 to the right hand side. I will get 14. Divide both sides by 17. I have my answer, 14 over 17. Since this is not a rational equation, I don't need to worry about restrictions. And this is probably the correct answer. If you want to be safe, put it back into the original equation and then check the left and right hand side. Number 9. 6 over 3x plus 1 plus 3 over x minus 1 equals 21 over 10. First thing to do, this is definitely a rational equation, so we have some restrictions. There are 2 variable denominators, which is right here. So we will find out that there are restrictions. The first one, x cannot be negative 1 over 3. The second one, x cannot be positive 1. Those will be the restrictions for our x. Once we find out the restriction, the next thing to do will be LCD. So we're going to find out LCD. To find out LCD, you're going to find out all the different factors across all the denominators. We have 3x plus 1, that's one factor. We also have x minus 1, and we also have 10. All of them appears at most once. Therefore, that's our LCD. And then we're going to multiply every single term by that LCD. So for this problem, since it's a little bit complicated, I'm going to write it all out. First term multiplied by LCD Let me just copy this. It's probably easier this way. So the first term multiplied by LCD plus second term multiplied by LCD equals the third term 21 over 10 multiplied by LCD. And now it's the most exciting part. You cross out common factors for each part. First part, 3x plus 1 can be cancelled out. Second, x minus 1 can be cancelled out. And the third one, 10 can be cancelled out. And then you write down what's left. For the first part, I'm going to multiply 6 and 10 first. That gives me 60. And then I distribute that into x minus 1, so 60x minus 60. That's the first part. Second part, I'm going to multiply 3 and 10 first. That's 30. And then I distribute into 3x plus 1. That will be 9x plus 30. Equals, on the right hand side, unfortunately you have this binomial times binomial, so you have to FOIL it. After you FOIL, you have to distribute 21. I'm just going to give you the answer right away. It's going to become 63x squared minus 42x and minus 21. You just have to be very patient for each part. Write everything out so it's clear. It's clearly presented in front of you. And then we're going to rearrange the terms. Since the coefficient of x squared is positive on the right hand side, I'm going to move everything to the right hand side. But before I do that, let's combine like terms. So I just noticed that I forgot that 90 right here. It's a 90x. Sorry about that. So let's combine like terms on the left hand side. It should give you 150x minus 30 on the left hand side equals 63x squared minus 42x minus 21. And then I'm going to move that 150x to the right hand side. It's going to give me negative 192x, which is pretty ugly number. And then move that negative 30 to the right hand side. It's going to give me positive 9. On the left hand side becomes 0. And this quadratic equation is still pretty nasty because the numbers are pretty big. There's one thing I can do though. I could divide this equation by 3 to reduce the number a little bit. If I do that, on the left hand side will be 0. And then you have 21x squared minus 64x plus 3. And for the right hand side, we could do educated guess to factor it. If you factor it, it's going to become 21x minus 1 times x minus 3 equals 0. By 0 product property, each of these could be 0. Therefore, we have potentially two solutions. One is 1 over 21. The other one is positive 3. And make sure you check with our restrictions. Our restriction says x cannot be negative 1 over 3 or 1. Neither of our solution matches those restrictions. So we could safely say that these two are allowed. Those are our solutions to number 9. Number 11. Number 11 is another proportion problem. So the best way to solve this, as we illustrated earlier, cross multiplication. So you do cross multiplication. We have x squared minus 2x equals 6x minus 15. Since the coefficient of the x squared is positive on the left hand side, I'm going to move everything to the left hand side. And that's going to give me x squared minus ax plus 15 equals 0. Let's align our steps at the equal sign. On the left hand side, we could factor this into x minus 3, x minus 5 equals 0. By 0 product property, each of them could be 0. So our potential answer is x is 3 or 5. Remember, we need to check with our restrictions. We have two variable denominators, 2x minus 5 and x minus 2. If we make them equal 0, we find out two restrictions. X cannot be 5 over 2 or positive 2. Luckily, none of our answer matches with the restrictions, so we could safely say that those two are possibly the solutions to number 11. Objective B, solve applied problems involving rational equations. Number 13. An airplane has a speed of 500 mph in calm air. Traveling with the wind, it can travel 2,120 miles. In the same number of hours it would take for the plane to travel 1,880 miles going against the wind. Find the speed of the wind. Well, this problem sounds pretty complicated. First thing to do, let's make a variable. They want you to find out the speed of the wind, so we could just make this as our variable. We could make it x, or you could make it w. And then, since this is a motion problem, I'm going to use the formula rate times time equals distance. So I'm going to use this formula to create my table. There are two situations. One is traveling with the wind. The other one is traveling against the wind. So you just write it out. I guess I should write with the wind, probably better. And now you just need to fill in the table with the information that's given. So first of all, when airplane traveling with the wind, the rate will be increased by the speed of the wind. In the calm air, the travel speed for the airplane is 500, and you have to plus the speed of the wind, which is x. That will be the rate if the airplane travels with the wind. The distance, according to the question, is 2,120. So you put 2,120 right below D. And then you could apply the formula to find out the time. So simply use the distance, 2,120, divided by the rate, which is 500 plus x. So that is the time it takes for the airplane to travel with the wind for 2,120 miles. And we're going to do the same thing for the second situation. Let's move it slightly down a little bit. The rate in this case, since you're traveling against the wind, the rate will be decreased by the speed of the wind. So instead of adding x, you have to subtract x from 500. The distance in this case, according to the question, is 1,880. Using the same formula, we will divide the distance, 1,880, by the rate, 500 minus x, and that is our time for the airplane to travel against the wind. And now is the time to create the equation. What would be the equation? Well, the problem did say that the time is the same for both situations, and that's our equation. So the time when the plane travels with the wind, this is the time, write it out, equals the time it takes if the airplane travels against the wind. This is the time. Therefore, we have this rational equation. If we solve this rational equation, the best way is definitely cross multiplication. So I'm gonna omit the steps. It's very similar to what we did before. So once you do cross multiplication, you're gonna get a linear equation, and then you can solve for x. Eventually, we will get x is 30 miles per hour. What that means is the speed of the wind is 30 miles per hour. So you just write the speed of the wind is 30 mph. Number 15. Apprentices takes 5 times as long to finish a job as it does a master plumber. Working together, it takes them 4 hours to finish the job. How long would it take the apprentices working alone to finish the job? So we have two subjects, apprentice and the master plumber. they're doing the same job. So this is a work problem. For work problem, we also have a formula. The formula is slightly different from the formula for the distance problem, but it's the same thing. So first we have a rate times the time equals, since it's a work problem, it's not going to be distance anymore. It's going to be the amount of work that you have done during that period. So we're going to make it as a W. That is our formula, R times T equals W. And then we're going to make our variables. The question says how long would it take the apprentice working alone to finish the job. So I'm going to make this one as our variable. Let's make it X. You could also make it T or make it A, whatever works for you. And then I'm going to write down different situations. So you have apprentice working alone, and then you have the master working alone, and you also have them working together. So write it down, and then fill in the table. According to the table, they're doing the same, according to the question, they're doing the same job. Since it didn't say what kind of job it is, it just says finish a job. We'll just make the work 1 for each case. And we could start with the second sentence. Working together, it takes them 4 hours to finish the job. So for together, time is 4 hours. And that means the rate has to be 1/4 because rate times time is work. So work divided by time is rate. And then our variable X represents the amount of time that it takes for the apprentice to work alone in order to finish the job. So we will put X in the first row. According to the first sentence, it takes the apprentice 5 times as long to finish the job. Therefore, the master will spend X over 5 amount of time to finish the same job. According to what we have, then we could write down the rate. So for the first row, you do work divided by time, 1 divided by X. That's the rate of the apprentice. As for the rate of the master, 1 divided by X over 5, and that will simplify to 5 over X. And now we have everything we need. How do you create the equation? Good question, right? When you create the equation, you're going to use this column, the rate, to create your question, because we have the expression for the rate of each of them, and we also have the rate if they work together. The equation is simply the rate of apprentice plus the rate of the master equals the rate of working together. So this is the equation. To solve this equation, you could combine the left-hand side because they have the same denominator. So it's simply 6 over X equals 1/4. And then you could simply do cross multiplication and find it out the answer, because it's a proportion equation. If you do cross multiplication, we get X equals 6 times 4, which is 24. When you answer this question, you will say it would take the apprentice 24 hours. And that's it for 7.5. Thanks for watching.